Welcome to Insight Builder channel, large language model automators, Python experts, and my dear friends. Connecting a WebSocket to AI Shop. Basics of Websocket Server and how it all works. Part 2 of multi-part series that I have been discussing recently. We, in the last video, saw what are WebSockets, why are WebSockets, and also we saw where the WebSockets are used. And finally, we had seen a couple of demos. Right. In this discussion, what we are going to do is we are going to understand how those demos worked. So in the first demo that you saw, the demo was the actual AI shop that was connected. And it was the WebSocket was streaming the data to the front end. The data was streaming to the front end after we clicked on the socket stream button. So the basic idea is that when I clicked on the socket output button last time, and the update started flowing in this area where my mouse is moving. How this happened? This happened because there was a backend server that was feeding the data to the front end. The front end was having JavaScript, which was placing the data that it was receiving onto the front end. So both Python, the backend of the WebSocket server, and the front end, that is the JavaScript client JavaScript script, was taking the data and it was populating the front end. In the backend, the Python script was connected to the database, which is again supported with the help of Python module called as PV. That was connecting with the local database file and the table, and it was populating the data and then it was feeding it. When it comes to the one more important part is that the localhost server is also connected via internet to the OpenAI models. That is again is supported by Python APIs, and it is running in the cloud. The API is running in the cloud, and we are trying to get the replies from the OpenAI model to the server. So all these things are happening in the backend. The key aspect that I want you guys to remember is that this particular socket that you are seeing here, this WebSocket object, the moment the server and the front end gets connected, this kind of a pipe gets established. This green messages come from the front end to the back end, that is the server, and the orange messages come from the back end and goes to the front end. So this back and forth activity keeps on happening until the WebSocket object is closed or destroyed. There are three parts here. So you can see the WebSocket server stores the data in the client side, triggers the message. So this is the first part of it. WebSocket server connects to the remote API and gets the data and stores it in the database. So this is the two-part things that we saw in the last video. We also saw that there were cases when, without even clicking on any kind of triggering, the output started flowing. So there were cases when you saw that once I refreshed a HTML page, the page started loading and automatically the population, the front end was getting populated by a list of text. And this list of texts were fed by the server to the front end. And it was done automatically by the server using a while loop or a for loop. It can be any of those things. And it was sent to the front end using random timing. So that's how this was happening. And again, there is WebSocket. The moment we refresh the front end web page, the JavaScript that is powering up the front end, the HTML page, connects with the server, and the WebSocket object is established, and the port number that you see here and the port number that you see here gets connected, and the communication starts happening. That is how this setup is being done. And finally, we have the client-side triggers. It's not very different from what you saw in the first time. So here, in this point that we looked at, the client triggers using the socket stream option or socket output option, and the server starts pushing the data out. So the same thing has happened here, but in a very simpler fashion. So now this is how the actual underlying tech works. So basically this WebSocket object is the important part of this entire blueprint. So how to work with this WebSocket objects? So what are the key requirements of creating such a kind of a setup where there is a front end, where there is a back end with and also creating a WebSocket object. So first things, we need a WebSocket enabled server that runs Python, and we need a JavaScript in the front end. A JavaScript is basically a simple script that connects to the server on this particular port, and it waits for the data. So this is what we need, and we need to write both the server and the client scripts and ensure that we can place the data in the client script back onto the front end. So these things are done by the JavaScript. In the back end, in case of Python, we are going to process the text data or process the data that is already present in the server, or process the IoT data. In case of the demo that we saw, the dashboard that was getting updated automatically, we had to create or extract data from somewhere. It could be the IoT device, it could be some manufacturing unit. So we will extract the data from there time by time and then populate it to the dashboard. So those things will be taken care by the server. So that logic we need to put it in the backend, and the front end logic will be put into the JavaScript. What we are going to do next is we are going to dive into a very simple project which involves the Python server as well as the front end script, and we will see how the WebSocket is created. Just to make you recollect that in the last video we were looking at a basic server, WebSocket server, and in that when we clicked, we got this kind of a payload. Here it is saying it is empty string, and we are getting a packet which is actually saying it's received a message. And here if you update name, and if I click on this, you'll see that the payload is update name and the packet is received back is update name, and this gets updated in the front end also. This is what we are going to code in this particular discussion. So let's dive into the code. Or even more simpler script will be to work on no trigger, where the concepts are much more simpler. So the no trigger will look like this. When you have a front end like this, when the no trigger server, the Python WebSocket server is running at the back end, and the front end connects with the no trigger, this kind of the message keeps on updating. And you can see that if I even click these things, the message here gets updated. But apart from that, you don't see any other information that I provide here that is getting updated here. So how these things are happening? So we will be looking into the mechanisms that is running this stuff in the backend. So let's refresh this page, and you'll see the moment I refresh this page, again it starts from 0, meaning it's connecting back to the server, and the connection is re-established and the server starts from the beginning. So these things are happening in with a particular logic. So we will try to understand these things right now. So I'm stopping the server, I'm going to the code. You'll see there are a couple of points that we need to understand before we dive into the code. As I already told, there are going to be 3 major scripts or programming snippets that we'll be working with. One is the server underscore no trigger.py. That is will be the basic WebSocket server, and we will have an index.html page that will contain the JavaScript client at the script source. So these are the two programming scripts, that is JavaScript as well as the Python script. And then we have the front end, that is the HTML page, which will provide you the framework or the plan into which the data will be placed. So this is what we are going to understand how these things are working. We will first of all target the server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a high level information on the server to begin with. The server has to have 2 major libraries installed. WebSockets has to be installed, and Async.io has to be installed. So to install this stuff and the necessary supporting libraries, I have a requirements.txt that will be shared to you guys in the GitHub repo. The description will be shared to you in the video description below. The link will be shared with you in the description below. Just a minute. The libraries necessary will be available in the requirements.txt that will be inside the basic_socket_frontend folder in the GitHub repository that I will be sharing. The entire link path will be shared with you. So this will contain a lot of supporting libraries that is required. Almost 75 libraries that you can see here are required. You can do a pip install -r and you can tag this requirement.txt to that command and it will install it. Now let us go back to the server. There are two main libraries that we are going to, two main modules that is required, that is the WebSockets and the Async.io. Async.io is going to be the base framework on which the WebSockets work. Async.io is a way that Python can be made into an asynchronous operating program. Now, I'm not going to dive into what is asynchronous, how these async works, right? That is going to be a different discussion altogether that I'm going to let you guys to explore. What I'm going to discuss right now is how to use the async functions and how to avoid those functions and use Async.io to run the WebSockets. That's going to be my primary concentration. The other module is the serve function from the WebSockets module. This serve will be used for creating the server. These two are supporting modules, JSON and random. The server will have two parts. There will be always a async function handler or the processing function that is going to do take WebSocket as a parameter. So this WebSocket that you see here is the same WebSocket that you see here. This yellow box that you see here is what this particular WebSocket object. So this WebSocket object will be thrown from the client to the server, and that's how the connection gets established. And in order for this WebSocket connection to be established, there are a couple of more things to be done that we'll dive into as we go into the discussion. Here, what you are seeing is that I'm creating two variables, message packet and index. I'm using a simple while true loop in Python, and I am processing some messages. I'm creating a JSON, I'm creating a dictionary, and in the dictionary, I am dumping the dictionary into a string, into a reply message variable, and that reply message only I am sending it over the WebSocket. So the main idea here is that WebSocket object that is getting into this function as a parameter or an argument has a send method. So through that send method, you are going to send the reply message. And this reply message goes and hits the front end script, the JavaScript that I'll be discussing in the next couple of minutes, and it gets processed there. The logic that you are looking at here is pretty straightforward. If you are in this particular place, we are actually creating a string literal with the index number. So that's what you are seeing as a sending message here, 1 2 3 4 5. So sending message 1 2 3 4 5. That is what you are seeing in this. And this particular message is wrapped into a packet key and put into this message packet. So that's what you're seeing here. It's a dictionary, and this dictionary is dumped using the JSON module as a string, and string is sent to the front end. Keep one thing in mind: this particular send method will only work with the strings. It will not work with any of your dictionary, list, string, dictionary or list or integer objects directly. It has to be converted to string, and then it has to be placed inside this bracket, or else it will actually throw an error. It's very, very important. Second point, you need to always remember that you need to place the await keyword here. The same way you kept the async keyword here, this is not a simple function. This is an asynchronous Python function. So whenever you see async keyword, it means it's a asynchronous Python function, meaning the function can contain awaitable methods and functions. So without async, you cannot have await. Both are linked together. That's very, very important. Keep that in mind. And after I send, you have to await the Websocket.Send, or else the server will not work. If you don't use this await method, await keyword, then this particular command will not work and the server will stop working, and it will actually throw you errors which is not very clear to understand. And the second thing, we are awaiting the server to sleep for random time for 2 to 5 seconds. So this is what this particular random call does, and we are making it to sleep. And the sleep that you are going to use is not a regular sleep. We have to use the asynchronous sleep, or else if you are going to use time.sleep, it will not work. Keep that in mind, and we need to await the sleep also, because we are trying to work in the asynchronous world, and in asynchronous world, await and async are going to be ubiquitous. So this is from the perspective of having nothing to trigger. So there is no trigger coming from the front end. Once the server starts, this while true loop begins, and it keeps on pushing the data forever until the server cuts off, until the front end cuts off. The moment the front end cuts off, this WebSocket object is cancelled, meaning the WebSocket object is removed, and the server doesn't work because there is no any call to this handler, correct? That is how, whenever you saw that whenever I refresh this page, the message started from 0. So only when the WebSocket object is sent to the server from the front end, this entire function starts working, and it starts working from 0. Fine. So this is about the first part of the server. Now comes the second part. The handler function that you saw, the async handler function, that has to be served to the world as a WebSocket. And in order to do that, we need to use this serve function, and we need to provide the function, this handler function, along with the host or the IP that you are going to host this WebSocket, and along with the port. So this is the port that you saw here in this location. So this port is decided by you, but this port is not decided by the front end. It is by default randomly allocated to the front end, and any of the ports from somewhere around 1000 or 1500 up to 64,000, any of the ports can get allocated. Why 1500 or 2000? Because those ports are allocated to various applications. I think even up to 5000 ports, I think it's allocated to various different applications. Those things you can look it up, but this will be a random number. You cannot control it, but this is the number that you control using this particular argument. Once you do that, you are going to run async.io.future. This is going to make the WebSocket server run in a loop continuously until unless you send a sigterm, that is signal to terminate. And this main function has to be run again using async.io.run. See, understand, the functions cannot run by themselves. You need to call these functions, right? The handler function is called by the called inside the serve function, and the serve gets initiated the moment the main function gets called. The main function is called under this particular clause in if clause in the script. Whenever I run server node trigger in the command line, whenever I do this server node trigger, this goes back here, it starts the main function. This main function will start serving the server, and it will wait. The server will wait for this handler to be triggered. And for the handler to be triggered, we need to go to the front end and we need to refresh. The moment I refresh, the handler will get triggered. The WebSocket from the front end will go to the back end. You can see here, if you go to the inspect, you'll see in the console that just a second, let me refresh it. You'll see that the navigation has been connected to the backend, and the communication starts happening. Fine. Now we have seen the server. One of the important points I wanted to highlight here is this kind of a handle, async with serve. So this kind of a pattern, async with serve, is new and it is used only for WebSockets. So keep this in mind, and this async.io.future has to be awaited. If it is not awaited, then the WebSocket server will throw an error. And most importantly, the main function has to be async function. It should not be the regular Python function. So all these things are something that we can easily miss out, and the WebSocket server will not come up, and you will not be able to see these kinds of outputs. So keep this in mind. And next, what you're going to do is we are going to dive into the JavaScript. JavaScript is pretty simple compared to the server that we saw. JavaScript starts by the window. The window is something that you see here. This is the window. and the window will have the document. So this is the document that you're seeing. So this is the document that gets updated like this. All the HTML tags that you're seeing is actually part of the document. So the window holds the document, and the document holds the tags or the data that we are updating. So you can see that as I am talking, this data is getting updated. And also if I open this, you'll see that this is also getting updated here. If you scroll down, you'll see that additional lists are getting added, and you can it's happening real time, right? So all these things are happening because there is a JavaScript that is doing this. So the JavaScript is called as no_trg.js. So that's what we are going to review right now. So we saw about the window. Window is the Chrome window, and we are going to add an event listener, and we are going to tell that once the DOM, that is the document object model, what you saw here, this is called as document object model. Once this document object model is loaded, then the moment it is getting loaded, run this function, run this entire code. That's what it says. Okay, and the first line that this function executes is the connection to the localhost server, the same server that we created here. This server is running on port number 7555, and it is having an IP of localhost. This is what this connection happens using the WebSocket object. So new WebSocket is like creating a new instances of WebSocket, the same WebSocket that we discussed here, this particular WebSocket object that we saw. That's what it is doing. After this particular step is done, the entire WebSocket is assigned to webc instance. Now, after that, the WebSocket is idle. We will be using the WebSocket whenever we need it. So one of the important places where you will use is when you are going to click a particular button, we want to send a payload to the server. So at the time you'll use webc.send. So this send is same or similar to what you see in this Websocket.send. So WebSocket has two major methods, that is receive and send. We have not seen the receive still. We have only seen the send right now. And this particular part of the code will not get executed when you are working on no_trg.js. It's not required actually. Why? Because by default, the WebSocket is starting to get the message. The moment I start the server, this is actually running here. The moment I start the server, webc.onMessage. So this is one of the attributes that is present inside the JavaScript on message, and it is actually waiting for the data. This data will contain this payload. So you see this payload. This payload will come into this data, which will get parsed, and if there is a packet in the reply. So if you go back here, there is a packet in the reply dictionary or the object JSON. If it is there, then I am telling that select the trg id document object, and then inside the inner HTML, make this particular kind of a string literal. So this string literal is going to take the reply JSON and look up the packet key, and it is going to place the data back. So if you look at the reply JSON, this is the reply JSON, and for the packet key, this is the text data. So that's what gets updated in the front end. So that's what you're seeing here. You are not seeing the entire JSON object or the dictionary object. You are only seeing the text data that is connected to the reply packet. So all these things are done with help of JavaScript. Now, what is the HTML doing? HTML is the document object model. So the HTML tags that you're looking at is the document object model. And this document object model is what you are trying to work with. And here you can see that there are a couple of simple looking paragraphs, inputs, clicker, etc. And in the bottom, you can see there is a UL tag with the ID TRG. So this TRG is same as this TRG, right? So document.querySelector will select this UL tag, and the inner HTML, we will start updating this particular list. And you can see that I am actually doing a plus equal to, meaning I am first of all taking whatever data is there inside the inner HTML attribute and then adding this particular data back to the existing inner HTML. So that's why you are seeing that all the HTML, inner HTML is present, is getting updated on top of it, and it is getting updated at the bottom. So now you have seen 3 steps. You have seen 3 things, the 3 things that we discussed in the beginning. Right, let me actually zoom out a bit so that it will be easier for me to navigate this. So we saw 3 different scripts. One is the server script that we saw, that is no server underscore no trigger .py. We saw the no trg.js file, and we saw the index.html. And all these 3 things come together and help us to create a real-time updating bidirectional data path using the WebSockets on HTML page. So that's what I wanted to introduce to you in this particular discussion. So this part 2 of the video will be the one of the key aspects of moving to the next step, where we are going to look at how we can incorporate WebSocket in Django based apps that we saw earlier. So I have not dove into the WebSocket concept in a full-fledged fashion. I am actually trying to dive into the application level of the WebSockets. If you guys have any questions, or if you want me to cover WebSockets from a very basic level, and you want to look into how the WebSockets needs to be coded, there are lots of examples that I already uploaded into the same repo that I'll be sharing. You can try to look at that. And also there is a very good tutorial that has been provided by the WebSockets library itself, the module itself. Take a look at that. It's very informative. Complete the tutorial. You will be able to understand WebSockets inside out. And finally, if you have any questions, do leave it in the comment section, and do subscribe to my channel for further updates on similar kind of videos. And till the next video, practice, do WebSockets, practice. See you guys.